Welcome to the last video for section 1.1. In this video we are going to talk about order of operations. Many of you probably learned order of operations in a previous math class, and maybe you learned it by PEMDAS, or maybe you learned a saying like, "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally," something like that to help you remember the order. And the P stood for parentheses. Well, in our steps that we have here on this slide, I put the first step as grouping symbols, which does certainly include parentheses, but it could also include square brackets or absolute value bars. So you can still remember this PEMDAS, but just know that the P is any grouping symbols, not just parentheses. And if you were to have a division bar and you had some operations to do on top and some operations to do on bottom, you would treat those as if they were in parentheses, so that you would do everything on top, do everything on bottom, and then the last thing you would do is this division. Second, you're going to do exponents. Any exponents in the problem. That's the next step. Third is multiply and divide from left to right. So sometimes it's a little confusing to write it like this. If I write PEMDAS, I usually do P, E, and I put M and D together and A and S together. Because you don't always multiply before you divide. When you're choosing between just those two operations, it is correct to work from left to right. So if the division is left, you do it first. If the multiplication is on the left, you do it first. So always do multiply and divide from left to right when you're just working with those two operations. So MD together on the same step. And then add and subtract, we're putting those together as well. And those can also be done left to right. You don't have to always add before you subtract. So let's practice some examples. Here in this example, we see there are square brackets. There's also parentheses, but inside the parentheses there's no operation. Those are just there as a multiplication symbol. So first step is we're going to work inside the square brackets. And when we look inside those, we see there are several operations. We've got addition, division, multiplication. So we know that multiply and divide comes before the addition. So it's one of these two that's going to come first. And then the rule that we just talked about, with these two operations, it's left to right. So since the division is left of the multiplication, then that's what we're going to do first. And everything else just comes down. Try to keep your work nice and neat. Bring everything down on each step. And then when we get to the operation we're doing, we're going to write the answer to that. So 15 divided by 5 would be 3. And then you bring down the times -4. So next step, we're still working inside the brackets. We've got addition and we've got multiplication. Multiplication comes before addition. Keep the brackets, still bringing everything down. And then we're going to do this operation. Positive 3 times -4 is a -12. And you can write it either as plus -12, or you can just write -12. Either way is fine. Okay, either way is fine. If you want to, for your subtraction, always do the leave, change, change, then you probably would want to just go ahead and leave it as plus -12. So then we're still working inside the brackets. I'm just going to go ahead and leave those on there. And we're going to do 2 plus -12, so different signs. We subtract, take the sign of the larger. And now those brackets are really just a separation between the subtraction and the negative. They do not have any operation left inside them. So I'm going to do the subtraction, and so I'm going to leave change to addition, change to the opposite, and my final answer is a positive 22. So when you do your work on these type of problems, again, I would like for you to go down the page. I would like for you to bring everything down on each step, and you're going to write the answer to the operation you're doing, but everything is coming down. So practice that when you do your homework, of writing the work as neatly and completely as you can. So number 2. This one has parentheses, so we're going to work inside the parentheses first. And when we look inside, we see that there is an exponent, there is subtraction. So the exponent comes first. Let's put this over here. We got parentheses, exponents, multiply and divide from left to right, add and subtract left to right. Okay. So inside, we've got 3 squared. Let's do that. That means 3 times 3, so that becomes 9. And you actually, if you wanted to, could go ahead and do this other exponent on that same step. So remember, 2 cubed means 2 times 2 times 2. It does not mean 2 times 3. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. Now we still need to go back to our parentheses, and we're going to do 9 minus 15. If you need to think of it as 9 plus negative 15, you can. Signs are different, so you subtract and take the sign of the larger. Okay, so now we're down to addition and multiplication. We're going to do the multiplication before the addition. So I've got a positive 4 times a negative 6 is a negative 24. And again, you have the choice of writing plus negative 24, or you could just write minus 24. Either way is fine with me. And bring down the plus. Now we've just got addition left. And remember, it does not matter what order you do addition in. If you prefer to do the 12 plus 8 first, you can. So we'll go ahead and work it that way. 12 plus 8 is 20. And then I'm just going to bring down my plus negative 24. Different signs, subtract, take the sign of the larger. Or if you had worked it left to right instead, let's just do that real quick. 12 plus negative 24 is negative 12. And then negative 12 plus 8 is negative 4. So either way there, remember, addition is commutative. Number 3. This one has parentheses, and then inside the parentheses you've got some absolute value bars. When you have more than one set of grouping symbols, always start with the innermost. So that would be our absolute value bars. We're going to bring everything else down. Keep the bars on. We have to keep the bars until we get a single number inside that we can take the absolute value of. So I've got multiplication, I've got exponent, I've got subtraction. You actually could go ahead and do the multiply and exponent in the same step. So we could do the 2 times 3, and then 4 squared is 16. Keep the bars on, keep the parentheses on. Now we still need to do that subtraction that is in the bars. So we're going to do 6 minus 16, which is negative 10. If you need to think of it as 6 plus negative 16, that's the same thing. Then, now that we have one single number inside the bars, we actually take the absolute value. So the absolute value of negative 10 would be a positive 10, and the bars come off when we do that. Now inside the parentheses, we can do the addition. And the last step is to multiply. We get 72, and the signs are different, so the answer is negative. Negative 72. A lot of times students struggle with these problems with the absolute value in, so make sure you really understand how to do this. You get it down to just one number inside the bars, and then take the absolute value, which is always positive, and it's only when you take that absolute value that the bars come off. Okay, let's do one more example, and this one has a big fraction bar in it. So you're going to do order of operations on top, order of operations on bottom, and then you'll do the division, and the very last thing you'll do is that square that is on the outside. So let's start on top. I've got multiply, I've got exponent. You can do those in the same step. When they have the addition or subtraction between them, you can. So we're going to do 9 times 2. And let's come out to the side here and look at negative 2 cubed. So that means negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Because the negative's in the parentheses. So then that becomes a positive 4 times a negative 2. And answer would be negative 8. So keep this minus sign, bring it down, and then you get a negative 8 when you do the exponent. I'm going to keep the parentheses as a separation between my symbols. On the bottom, I'm going to do 4 squared, which is 4 times 4. And I'm going to do my exponent, negative 1 to the 5th power. So negative 1 times negative 1, 5 negative 1s. There's an odd number of negatives, so when you start pairing up, there's a negative left over, which makes you get a negative answer. And of course, 1 times 1 times 1, no matter how many ones, is still 1. So negative 1 to the 5th is negative 1. Keep the outside parentheses, keep the square. Now back at the top, minus a negative is the same thing as plus a positive. Your leave, change, change rule is used there. And on the bottom, we're going to do the multiplication. So we're going to do 3 times negative 1 is a negative 3. So again, you can write it as a minus 3, or you could write plus negative 3. Keep the parentheses and the square. Back to the top, now we're going to add 18 plus 8. And on the bottom, we're going to subtract. And then, now that we've got a single number on top and bottom, we're going to do this division. The fraction bar means divide. So we're going to do 26 divided by 13 is 2. And very last, we do this square that we've brought down. Try not to let that get lost as you go through your steps. So the very last thing is to square it. 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so hopefully those examples will help. Be sure to practice the homework, look at the examples as you are practicing, and then let me know in class if you have any questions about these problems.